do not forget to hit that like and subscribe button, guys, if you're new to the channel and if you enjoyed this video. So I decided to make a little comparison video comparing Lennox Lewis, the former, undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. I wanted to compare his first 23 fights to Anthony Joshua's first 23 fights. And I wanted to do that just because Lennox Lewis seems to be very critical on Anthony Joshua, on his decisions. And he's not looking at the fact that AJ has, like, I don't know, less than 25 fights. He's not looking at the fact that AJ is doing all these things with such little fights, right? And he's making it seem like AJ has been around for like 10 years. He has 40 plus fights like Deontay Wilder and all this other stuff. So I wanted to compare his first 23 fights to AJ's. And by the way, I'm not saying that AJ has a better resume than Lennox Lewis has overall. I'm just comparing his first 23 fights. I'm not saying that overall he has a better resume than Lennox Lewis' entire 41 professional fights. I'm just comparing both of their first 23 fights. And let me tell you this right now. When it comes to Lennox Lewis's first 23 fights and Anthony Joshua's first 23 fights, Anthony Joshua has a way better resume than Lennox Lewis's first 23 fights. These are facts, okay? Again, I'm not saying as a whole, but I'm saying when it comes to the first 23. Now, let's go to Lennox Lewis. If you actually go to Lennox Lewis and you see his first 23 professional fights, right? You're going to see that in his 23rd fight, he fought a guy named Tony Tucker. Prior to that, he fought a guy named Razor Ruddock, Mike Dixon, Derek Williams, Tyrell Biggs, Mike Weaver, Glenn McQuarrie. These are the type of guys he was fighting. Now, on his 23rd fight, he fought Tony Tucker. Now, mind you, Tony Tucker had just one loss, and Tony Tucker was a former champion, right? I believe he was the IBF heavyweight champion of the world, and he had lost it against Mike Tyson. He fought Mike Tyson, so he had just one loss, and it was against Mike Tyson. So you could say that was a good win for Lennox Lewis at the time because, like I said, he had just one loss. And he was coming off a long winning streak. So Lennox Lewis was the second guy to beat Tony Tucker. But was Tony Tucker a great heavyweight? Not really. No. I mean, he won a vacant title. He won the vacant IBF strap. A year later, he loses it to Mike Tyson. Then he loses to Lennox Lewis. And if you look at his career, every time he fought a good heavyweight, he would lose. Every time. So that tells me at least that he wasn't necessarily a great heavyweight, heavyweight. Again, I wasn't around during that time, but just looking at his box rec, just looking at the people he fought, it seems to me that he was one of those guys that he was like a subpar heavyweight. He'll be good at fighting maybe D-level fighters, but whenever he fought the creme of the creme, he would lose because again, he lost to he never really beat a legit elite heavyweight. Prior to that, he fought. And that was on his 23rd fight, Lennox Lewis. Prior to that, he fought Razor Ruddock. Now, Razor Ruddock, I would say, was another good opponent for Lennox Lewis at the time. Because, like I said, at the time, he was really a prospect, Lennox Lewis. If you just like, Mr. Lennox Lewis, just like Anthony Joshua is really a prospect because he had the same amount of fights that you currently had back then. And but here's the thing, Razor Ruddock had just come off 2 back-to-back wars with Mike Tyson. And if you look at, and many people say that those 2 wars that he had with Mike Tyson took a lot out of him. Because before he fought Mike Tyson, he was looked at as, I believe he was Canadian, he was looked at as like, he might be something in the heavyweight division. He was a big puncher, I believe. And then he fights Mike Tyson, he has these 2 back-to-back wars. And a lot of people say that those 2 back-to-back wars took a lot out of him. And then, of course, like 15 months later, he fights Lennox Lewis. Lennox Lewis destroys Razor Ruddock way quicker than Mike Tyson. That was the impressive part. The fact that Mike Tyson was obviously at the time considered the biggest puncher in the heavyweight division. He went to war twice with him, but Lennox Lewis destroyed him in like, 2 rounds. So that's what was very impressive. But again, does that maybe his 2 wars with Mike Tyson, did it take something out of him? Because if you look at what happened to Razor Ruddock's career, he went on he kept on losing after that. So it was pretty obvious that maybe he wasn't at his best anymore. And then prior to that, he fought a guy named Mike Dixon. I don't even know who this guy is. I'm going to be honest with you. I never heard of Mike Dixon. But I can tell you this. He's probably was never no all-time great. Because I don't remember. I don't see him in no Hall of Fame. Derek Williams. Tyrell Biggs. Tyrell Biggs is the dude who used to spar, what's his name? Didn't he spar, I think he either sparred Mike Tyson when he was a champion or he fought him in the Olympics, in 1984 Olympics. I remember seeing a documentary of something about Tyrell Biggs. Glenn McCrory, Mike Weaver. Mike Weaver, this is the guy who went to war with Evander Holyfield. Because when I was like a teenager, I used to look up all the history of the heavyweight division. I was such a big heavyweight fanatic back then. Anyway, guys, you guys see the guys he was fighting. None of the guys he was fighting were all-time greats. Now, let's just compare that to Anthony Joshua's 23 fights. Oh, and by the way, 2 fights later, he loses to Oliver McCall. Oliver McCall beats Lennox Lewis, man. Come on. All right, now let's compare that to Anthony Joshua's first 23 fights. Anthony Joshua is about to face Jarrell Miller, who's an undefeated heavyweight. I don't know, I can't say, I'll say this. Tony Tucker was definitely a step higher than Jarrell Miller just because he was a champion. He did fight. He did win a belt, and he fought Lennox Lewis, and he fought Mike Tyson. So he definitely had a better resume just because he fought Mike Tyson than Jarrell Miller. So I will say that maybe Tony Tucker was better than Jarrell Miller just because of the fact that he fought Mike Tyson. But that doesn't mean he would have lost to Jarrell Miller. That doesn't mean if Jarrell Miller would have fought him. Obviously, we don't know, but that doesn't mean he would have lost to him. He fought Alexander Povetkin. Alexander Povetkin, in my opinion, is better than any one of Lennox Lewis's 23 fights. Because he was a, just like, he was a monster puncher and a champion who did defend his belts. Right, a boogeyman. So I think he's actually better than any of Lennox Lewis's first 23 opponents. He fought Joseph Parker, an unbeaten champion. Another champion. Is he as good as the dudes that Lennox Lewis fought? I really don't know. Obviously, we would never be able to compare. But I just think in terms of the fact that he was unbeaten and a champion, I do think that's, again, guys like Razor Ruddock and Tony Tucker, these guys had losses already. What's his name? So... And then we got Takam. Maybe Takam was on the level of Razor Ruddock or what's his name, Tony Tucker. Vladimir Klitschko. Vladimir Klitschko is better than any one of Lennox Lewis's first 23 fights. He was a long-reigning champion. I don't care if he was up there in age. Vladimir Klitschko did not fight like a guy who was his age. He fought with a lot of ambition and he showed a lot of heart. And you know what? People say, well, he dropped Anthony Joshua. Yeah, but you know what? Lennox Lewis got knocked the fuck out against Oliver McCall. And Oliver McCall can wear the same fucking shoes as Vladimir Klitschko. Would you rather get dropped by Vladimir Klitschko or would you rather get dropped by Oliver McCall, right? I think we all know the answer to that. Then he fought Eric Molina. All right. Eric Molina would probably lose to all the first, Razor Ruddock and guys like that. Then he fought Dominic Breazeale. Dominic Breazeale, that would have been interesting seeing Dominic Breazeale versus Razor Ruddock. Dillian White. Dillian White, in my opinion, is better than any of the opponents that Lennox Lewis first fought in his first 23 fights. Obviously, guys, I'm not, a lot of these boxing fans are much older than me, so you guys would probably know way more than me if you're older than me when it comes to Lennox Lewis. Because, again, I didn't grow up watching Lennox Lewis because when I got into boxing, Lennox Lewis had been retired. But when I first got into boxing, I did a lot of research on these fights. And I remember doing a lot of research on Lennox Lewis. And one thing I will say is he was not fighting no all-time greats in his first 23 fights. He was not fighting these type challenging fights in his first 23 fights. Again, in my opinion, his most toughest fights in his first 23 fights, or his best opponents, were Razor Ruddock and were Tony Tucker, because those guys were known. Those guys were known as the guys who fought, what's his name, Mike Tyson. That's why they were his best to fight, wins. But again, were those guys all-time greats? No. Those guys weren't all-time greats, and they didn't go on to be all-time greats. They went on to lose. Razor Ruddock went on to lose several fights. Tony Tucker went on to lose several fights. So it wasn't like these guys went on to be all-time greats. Then I could be like, oh, wait a minute, though. Tony Tucker and Razor Ruddock went on to do all this stuff. So maybe these guys are as good as the first 23 fights that Anthony Joshua had. But I personally think that Anthony Joshua has a way better resume than Lennox Lewis had in his first 23 fights. First of all, Lennox Lewis wasn't even he was. He was the WBC champion, I believe. Yeah, my bad. But again, he was the WBC champion that he won, I believe, when what's his name? Riddick Bowe refused to fight him, induct him, and he vacated the belt. And then I guess he fought for a vacant title. But again, at that time, Lennox Lewis was just the WBC champion. While just compare that to Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua is the IBF, the WBA, and the WBO, and the IBO heavyweight champion of the world. So in terms of accomplishments, he had way more time. He had done way more. Anthony Joshua currently has done way more than what Lennox Lewis had done in his first 23 fights. Again, Lennox Lewis was basically what Wilder is right now. He had just one belt. But again, I don't think he had fought, for example, Tyson Fury is better than any of the guys that Lennox Lewis fought. So just in terms of like the guys he's fought wasn't maybe as good as somebody like Tyson Fury. But like I said, if you compare both of their first 23 fights, I think Anthony Joshua has a better resume. So I think what Lennox Lewis needs to understand is at least give him credit for that. Be like, listen, look at what he's done in such a short period of time. Like Lennox Lewis acts like as if Anthony Joshua is a veteran and he has like 40 plus fights and he's avoiding these. Like, it's ridiculous. He's done all this with less than 25 fights. He's still in his prime. He still has many more years to go. And if, in my opinion, if Anthony Joshua keeps fighting all the best dudes and eventually becomes undisputed, I'm probably one day going to be sitting here saying that Anthony Joshua is the best British fighter, the best British heavyweight to ever come out of England. He might just be better than Lennox Lewis. We're going to have to wait and see what comparing his career after he retires, maybe in 5-10 years. So, but I think Lennox Lewis is way too hard on Anthony Joshua. That's just my personal opinion, man. That's all I have to say, guys. Thanks for watching.